The arrival Mark stepped off the steel ramp with steady steps as the heavy transport door slid open behind him. The air around him carried the scent of heated metal mixed with something strange he could not quite name. His boots hit the smooth ground of the Drogon base with a thud that echoed in the open chamber. Tall figures stood in rows ahead of him, broad shoulders, thick armor, blue-tinted skin, eyes like burning coal. These were the Drogon warriors, a race known across the galaxy for their pride and strength, and not known for kindness, he had read the reports, heard the warnings. Humans were not exactly respected here. In fact, they were seen as weak, soft, strange, and slow. Just tools, just flesh with a voice. But Mark was not here to change their minds with speeches. He had come as part of a military exchange program between Earth and Droga Prime. One human selected to live among them, train with them, and learn their ways. A test of trust, a show of peace. At least that was how Command explained. A group of Drogon soldiers moved aside as he passed. Some stared with sharp grins, others turned their heads in disinterest. A few snorted as if smelling something unpleasant. Mark said nothing, his face calm, his eyes taking in every small detail, each movement, each symbol carved into the walls, each pair of glowing red eyes tracking him. Then one of them stepped forward. He was taller than the others, his armor more detailed with black lines along the edges, his voice deep and harsh like a grinding blade. His name was Krev. Mark had read the name in briefing files. Elite Drogon fighter, winner of 12 arena challenges, known for hating outsiders. So, "You are the human," said Krev as he circled Mark slowly. "I thought you would be smaller." Mark stayed still. He looked up but did not speak. "No answer," Krev growled. "No bark, no bite. Are you a warrior or a worm?" Others chuckled. Mark gave a small shrug and continued walking. Krev moved beside him again, his voice louder. "Do all humans walk like they are scared of shadows, or is that just you?" Still Mark kept his pace, calm and steady. His silence only seemed to fuel Krev's mockery. Training began the next day. The Drogon drills were brutal. Hours of weapon drills, combat simulations, and physical tests under heavy gravity. Sweat rolled down Mark's back as he pushed through each task. He was not as strong as them, not as fast in raw power. But he adapted, he moved smart, he conserved energy. And he watched how they moved, how they boasted, how they laughed after every victory, how they never looked twice at him. Krev continued his games. During hand combat training, he would shove Mark hard enough to make him stumble. During group meals, he would make loud jokes about human bones breaking like paper. Mark stayed quiet, not because he was afraid, but because he was waiting. At night in his quarters, he trained alone. Shadowboxing, slow stretches, strength work with resistance bands. He did not complain. He did not call home. He did not sleep easy. On the 5th day, Krev pushed harder. During a weapons demo, he bumped Mark's hand just enough to make his laser misfire. The beam missed the target by a wide mark, and Krev laughed loud enough to make the room echo. "Look at that," he said. "Human hands cannot even hold a weapon straight." The next morning, Krev came into the human's chamber without warning, his heavy boots crushing small objects on the floor. He picked up Mark's old journal and flipped through the pages with dirty fingers, weak lines, weak words, nothing of a warrior. Mark stood by the doorway, calm, but his jaw tight. Krev tossed the journal onto the ground and stepped closer. He placed a hand on Mark's chest with a grin. "You hide behind silence. You are just prey that forgot to run." And then he leaned in and gave a small sharp bite on Mark's shoulder. Not deep, not enough to draw blood, but enough to send a message. In Drogon culture, that bite meant you were below them. It meant you were claimed. Mark stepped back, looked at him for a full moment, then nodded once and spoke for the first time since arriving. "You think this is over?" Krev grinned with full teeth. "For you, yes." Mark picked up the broken journal and placed it back on the shelf. Then he turned and left the room. Behind him, the Drogon laughed again, like victory had already been decided. But Mark had already made his choice. He would not play the victim in this game. He would not let the Drogon see humans as prey. He would not beg or bark or break. He would rise in their own arena, in their own laws, in their own style, and when the time came he would bite back the fire bills. Morning bell rang through the cold steel corridors as lights flickered to life. Mark rose from the thin bed without a word. His shoulders ached. The bruise from Krev's bite had turned a deep shade across his skin. Still he moved without pause, washed his face, tightened his boots, and left the room. In the hallway, Drogon soldiers walked with loud steps. Some laughed. Some glanced at Mark with smirks and quiet comments. One of them pretended to limp as he passed, mocking Mark's slower pace. Another fake yawned as if bored by his presence. Mark kept walking, eyes forward, hands loose by his sides. Breath steady like a soldier in deep snow at the training ground. Krev stood near the center, already warmed up, his arms crossed across his wide chest. His eyes locked on Mark. The moment he arrived, human shadow always shows up, thought he would hide. After last night, Mark said nothing. He moved to his station, checked his gear, and began warm-ups. The drills started fast. Movement under pressure. Close combat, grapple holds. This time Mark did not try to overpower anyone. He moved smarter, not harder, shifting weight at the right moments, slipping out of grips before they locked. He let the Drogon see he was learning during paired sparring. Krev stepped into Mark's zone again without warning. The instructor raised a brow but said nothing. Mark nodded and faced him. No protest. No fear. They circled in silence. Shrev attacked first, heavy foot forward, fast swing from the right. Mark ducked low, using the motion to spin behind him, placing a foot to Krev's ankle, but pulled back just before impact. He was not ready to strike yet. Not here. Not now. The crowd noticed. Some Drogon whispered among themselves. The human had not fallen. After training, the team gathered in the rest hall for food. Thick trays of protein-rich blocks sat on long tables. Mark took his tray and sat alone. Across the hall, Krev and his group laughed again, throwing looks in his direction. One of them mimicked the duel stance from earlier, wobbling like a toy. The room joined in the mockery. Mark sat still, eating slow and calm. Each bite tasted of sand and metal, but he forced it down. He had lived through worse. Jungle missions, ice crawls, hunger tests on distant moons. This was nothing new. Later in the night, Mark returned to his room and sealed the door. He pulled the lock twice. Then he pulled a small cloth bag from under the bunk. Inside lay a few items no one else had seen. Resistance bands cut from old training straps, smooth stones for grip training, and a worn photo of a mountain range from Earthy hung the photo on the wall using spare metal clips. Then he began his silent work. Slow breath in, slow breath out. Push, pull, balance, twist, repeat. His body moved like memory, not like effort. Every drill, every move etched deep from years of practice. Drops of sweat slid down his back, but his face stayed calm. A rhythm without music, a dance without sound. Hours passed. Still he trained. Not for show, not for pride, but for a purpose. By the third week, whispers began to spread across the base. A few Drogon noticed how Mark moved now. How he stayed balanced, even under pressure. How he stopped falling. How he began to step first instead of waiting. The jokes faded little by little, replaced by quiet interest, but Krev did not change. In fact, he pushed harder. He sabotaged equipment. He threw dirt into Mark's water filter. He replaced his weights with uneven metal rods. Still Mark said nothing. One night, while walking back from simulation duty, Mark passed the outer chambers, where recruits slept. He heard loud voices. Krev's voice rang louder than others. Humans are bark with no bite. Just look at the one we got here. A silent ghost with no pride. Mark paused by the corner, just out of sight. He stood there listening to each word, letting them sink into his bones. Then he turned and walked back to the main hall, not with anger, not with hate, but with certainty. The next morning, Mark submitted a request. was written in perfect Drogon script, passed to the commander without ceremony. A duel request. An official. Challenge the commander, read it twice, his sharp eyes lifting from the paper with slow surprise. You understand what this means, he asked without emotion. Mark nodded. Once you are not Drogon. This is not required of you still. Mark said nothing. The commander gave a slow breath, then nodded. It will be approved. The challenge begins in 3 cycles. The arena will be open. No tools. No allies. No aid. The message spread fast. A human had challenged Krev. The Krev. Elite warrior. Blood victor. Arena king. The Drogon soldiers buzzed with energy. Bets were placed. Food was stocked. Seats were claimed. Some thought it was a joke. Others called it suicide. A few stared at Mark with new eyes. Krev stood in the center hall, grinning wide. He slammed his hand to the wall hard enough to crack the surface. So the little worm wants to bleed in front of the crowd, brave or just stupid? His voice echoed through the space. Mark passed him without a glance. His walk steady like stone rolling. Down a slope in his chamber that night, Mark sat on the floor, wrapped his hands with old cloth, and stared at the mountain photo, not for pride, not for Fernet to prove anything to them, but to show something, to show what it means to be human. To show what it means to stand alone in fire and not fall. To show who really bites back. The bite back. 3 cycles passed, and the day of the duel arrived. The entire Drogon base buzzed like a stirred hive. Hallways were loud with heavy boots and sharp voices. Soldiers moved in groups toward the lower arena, carved deep under the stone floor of the mountain base. It was not just a training ground today. It was a battleground where dominance would be tested under ancient code. Mark stood alone in his chamber, dressing in silence. No armor, no weapons. Just cloth wraps over his hands and boots, reinforced with hidden bands of weight. He tied each wrap slow and tight, each pull locked with calm fingers. A sharp breath in through the nose, then a slower breath out through the mouth. Outside, the chamber doors opened with a long hiss. A Drogon guard gave a quick nod. It was time. Mark followed him through metal corridors glowing under red light. His heart stayed calm, his eyes steady. No fear, no shake in his step, just focus. Just silence that held weight like stone. The arena was wide and cold, shaped like a bowl with tall walls. Hundreds of eyes watched from above. Drogon warriors seated in layers, their faces lit by overhead beams. Loud voices quieted when Mark entered the center ring. Krev was already waiting. He stood tall, arms bare, chest wide, shoulders proud. His body covered in faded battle scars, each one a story of past fights. He smiled when he saw Mark, a cruel grin like a hunter who had already tasted blood. You showed up, that much surprises me, said Krev, stepping forward. Mark said nothing. He faced him, feet grounded back, straight, fists loose. No smile, no anger, just that same stillness that made others uneasy. A voice from the platform above called the start. The arena commander's word was law, and the moment it echoed, the duel began. Krev lunged with full power, a wide swing aimed to crush. Mark stepped aside, just enough, and used the weight of the charge to push the alien off balance. Not an attack, yet only a test. Krev adjusted fast and charged again, this time lower. Mark ducked under the swing, twisted behind, and tapped the Drogon's ribs with a quick strike. Light but sharp. The crowd gave small reactions. Whispers ran like wind. Krev turned and growled deep from his chest. No words now. Only fight. He attacked again, this time faster, his footwork sharp, his hands heavy. Mark blocked and dodged. Others took a few to the arms and ribs. Pain throbbed, but he stayed standing. He moved with thought, not rage. Sweat built on both their faces. The arena echoed with feet and grunts. Time passed without notice. Every breath now came with effort. Then something changed. Krev raised both arms in a double strike, a move used to crush defenses. Mark did not step back this time. He moved in with one sharp motion. He hooked his foot around Krev's leg. The Drogon stumbled just a little. Enough. Mark drove his shoulder into Krev's side, turned his body, and dropped him to the ground with a low sweep. Gasps came from the crowd. The Drogon champion was down before Krev could rise. Mark stepped over him, locked his arm around the thick neck and pressed hard. The alien twisted, kicked, tried to break free, but the hold was deep and close. Then Mark did something no one expected. He leaned down and sank his teeth into the alien's neck ridge. Not soft, not playful, but firm, deep, full of intent. The bite was placed at the exact spot where Drogon leaders marked their position. It was not random, it was known across their culture. It meant dominance. The crowd froze, time slowed. Krev's arms dropped. Mark stood and backed away. His breath steady, blood at the edge of his lips, his eyes calm. Silence ruled the arena. Then came the sound of movement. Krev sat up slowly, not with anger, not with pride, but with understanding. He looked at Mark for a long moment. No words came from his mouth. Only a nod. A full nod of acceptance. The commander above rose from his seat, his face unreadable by Drogon law. The challenger has proved superior. The duel is over. The words echoed through the chamber like thunder after lightning. Some in the crowd looked away. Others nodded with respect. A few even stood with clenched fists. Not in rage, but in recognition. Mark turned and walked toward the exit, his back straight, his steps slow. He did not raise his fists. He did not shout. He had done what he came to. Dokriv stayed behind in the center, still seated, his hand resting where the bite mark now burned. His chest rose and fell with deep breaths. He knew what had happened. The human had not only won, he had understood their ways and answered in kind. Outside the arena, wind blew through the stone halls. Mark walked alone back toward his chamber. Some Drogon stood aside as he passed. Others gave short nods. No words needed. Inside his room, he untied the wraps, washed the blood from his skin, and sat on the floor facing the photo of mountains once more. This was not about winning a fight. This was not about showing strength with noise. This was about something deeper, to earn respect not by shouting, but by standing, to prove something not just to others but to himself, to bite not for rage, but for meaning. The climax begins the days after. The duel passed like a slow burning fire across the base. News traveled fast. From the lowest mechanic levels to the high command tower, every Drogon now knew about the human who had stepped into the circle and walked out with blood on his teeth. And silence in his voice. Mark did not seek fame. He did not speak of the fight. He returned to his routine each morning with the same quiet energy. His steps remained the same, his meals unchanged, his workouts steady and sharp. But the way others looked at him began to shift. Drogon warriors who once mocked now watched with care. Some offered small nods when passing in the halls. Others said nothing but no longer stood in his path. Where laughter once followed him, silence now walked beside him like a shadow made of respect. Even Krev remained distant, yet different. He did not speak to Mark. He did not smile or scowl. But one evening during combat drills, he stepped aside and allowed Mark to lead the formation. No word, no fight, just a silent gesture that carried more weight than any medal. That night the base felt quieter than usual. Mark sat near the outer observation deck, watching the dark sky filled with strange stars. He remembered Earth not with longing but with clarity. The smell of wet grass after rain, the cold wind that danced across the high cliffs, the soft sound of boots on forest ground. Things far away yet still inside him, like breath inside lungs. A voice came from behind, not loud. Not cold. You changed something here. Mark turned slowly. The commander stood near the doorway, arms crossed, eyes steady. They thought you would fail, the commander said. They thought you would cry, fight, run, or break. But you did none of those things. You waited, you watched. And when the moment came, you answered in a way they could not ignore. Mark said nothing. He simply looked at the stars again. There's a ship preparing for outer range duty, the commander continued. Harsh lands, broken systems, high risk. They need someone who understands more than orders. They need someone who knows how to deal with those who think strength is only size and sound the meaning behind the words, hung in the air like dust before. Rain, think about it. The commander left without waiting for reply. Later, that same night, a message arrived on Mark's console. Coordinates, sector details, mission outline. No pressure to accept. Just an open door waiting beyond the fire. Mark closed the message without responding. He stood and returned to the center training hall. Lights dimmed, but still enough to see. He walked barefoot across the cold floor, each step a memory, each breath a rhythm. He moved through drills again and again, body flowing like water over stone. From the shadows someone watched, not spying, not hiding, just observing. Krev stood near the wall, arms folded, face calm. He did not speak. When Mark finished, he walked over and stood across from him. Neither moved. Neither blinked. You bit me, Krev said at last. You mocked me. Mark replied, you earned it. Then Krev said with a low nod. Two stood in silence before Krev finally turned away. This place needed a reminder. You gave it. Then he left. Next morning, Mark entered the command hall to give his answer. The commander sat by the long panel of controls, eyes scanning the data streams. Without lifting his head, he said, you are going. Mark nodded once. You will leave. By nightfall, gear will be prepared. Crew will meet you on orbit dock. They will expect a soldier. Show them what they actually get. Later, the ship arrived in the sky. A sleek vessel, black with faded marks from past storms. It hovered just above. The landing ring engines glowing low like fire under glass. Mark approached with his pack slung across his shoulder, boots echoing on the metal path inside the ship. The crew stood ready. Mixed faces, some human, some not. All eyes turned as he entered. One younger pilot whispered, that's him. The engineer gave a slow breath. He looks quiet. The captain, a tall woman with eyes like burnt copper, stepped forward and nodded. We heard you don't speak much. Mark met her gaze. Only when needed. Good, the captain said. There is too much noise out there already. They walked together through the ship, narrow halls, walls humming with life. Mark placed his bag in the corner locker, secured the straps, and sat on the bench near the main console. Outside, the stars waited with cold silence and endless motion. Departure began. The ship lifted, moved, turned, broke through the upper layers and disappeared into black space. Behind them, the Drogon base faded into a memory. Ahead of them, new grounds, new dangers, new chances. Mark leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and let the silence fill him. Had bitten not to win, but to rise. He had fought not for pride, but for place. He had spoken without sound and taught them. Through action now, a new fire waited in a place far beyond maps, and Mark was ready to burn through it. Final resolution. The new world was nothing like the Drogon base. No clean walls, no order, no structure. Only broken ground, black skies, twisted machines, and wind that carried dust from fallen towers. The air felt thick with silence, old silence. The kind that held memories of battles long gone. Mark stepped out of the ship with his gear on his back. Eyes sharp and breath even. The crew followed behind, scanning the ground, checking signs and reading the ruins. This place once held life, once held noise and voices. Now it held only the bones of what had been a beacon, pulsed somewhere under the rubble. Their mission was clear. Recover the lost tech signal and secure the area. Simple words in command briefings, but the ground here was not simple. Cracks opened without warning. Machines from older wars lay hidden under layers of dust. Strange. Lights flickered from corners where shadows should not move. The team spread out in pairs. Mark walked alone toward the west ridge where the signal grew stronger. His boots moved over sharp stones and dry roots. Nothing felt steady. Nothing felt alive. And yet he kept walking. As he climbed a broken stair carved into the rock, he heard movement. Slow and low. Not wind, not dust, something else. Something alive. He crouched near a cracked wall and waited. Eyes still, muscles calm, breath deep. Then from the fog came the shape. Not Drogon, not human, not anything from the files. It stood tall with limbs too thin and skin that shimmered like glass. It moved without sound. Its eyes glowed with strange light. It looked at Mark, not with anger, not with fear, but with curiosity. Mark stood slowly, no weapon drawn, no words spoken. The thing stepped forward. Its body flowed like smoke, its head tilted like a child hearing music for the first time. Then it stopped just 3 steps away. Mark raised his hand in peace. The thing did the same. A perfect mirror. Then, without warning, a shot rang out across the ridge. One of the crew had seen the shape from above and fired. Blast missed the creature but burned the ground beside it. The shape moved back. Not fast but not slow either. It faded into the fog without sound, leaving behind only footprints that began to vanish the moment they formed. Mark turned and saw the shooter standing on the ridge, eyes wide, gun raised. It was just watching. Mark called out, "You do not know that?" The shooter replied. Mark said nothing more. He looked back at the fog, now empty again. Later that night, the crew camped near the crash site of a fallen station. Fire cracked inside metal drums, and small lights blinked near scanners. The captain sat with Mark, going over data reports. "You saw it clearly?" she asked. "Yes," Mark said. "It mirrored me. It did not move to harm." "Strange," the captain said. "Nothing like that in records." Mark looked at the stars again. Sometimes records do not hold everything. The next day, the team found the signal source buried deep under a stone vault. Mark helped lift the cover, revealing a sphere wrapped in wires glowing with low blue light. As he touched the surface, he felt something not physical, not sound, just a pull like memory. Captain ordered it sealed and stored. Mission complete. The signal was stable. Time to return. On the journey back, the ship passed near the edge of the storm belt. Turbulence shook the floor panels and lights blinked off and on. One engine failed for half a minute before rebooting. Some crew shouted orders, others ran checks. Mark remained at his station, calm, focused, repeating system steps without pause. Once the systems calmed, the captain walked over and placed a hand on the console. "You are always steady," she said. Mark gave a slight nod. "You came from a place that tried to break you, and you left stronger." He looked at her for a moment, then said, "They tried to laugh me away, but I bit back." The crew never asked what that meant, but they never forgot the way he said it. When they returned to the station orbiting the nearest moon, the command staff received the report. Clean mission, fast recovery, stable performance. But they noticed something else in the files. The part about the unknown life form. The part about the calm reaction. They asked if it was true that the human had faced it alone. The captain replied with a short message. He faced more than that. Before this mission even started back on Droga Prime, the story of the bite was still told. In quiet corners, new recruits heard of the human who bit the warrior and walked out of the arena without raising his voice. Some said he was still out there, biting through new challenges with silence and fire. In a quiet chamber far from the noise, Mark sat once more with a journal in his lap. Not the old broken one. A new one with pages still empty. He looked at the first page, then he wrote, "I came as shadow, and they tried to push me down, but I rose like stone under pressure. I watched, I waited, and when the time came I showed them what we are. I did not bark. I did not bow, I bit, and that was enough." He closed the journal, placed it beside his gear, and looked at the stars once more. New worlds waited, new fires burned, and Mark was ready. The end.